For ad-free listening, our newsletter, special deep dive episodes, and members-only benefits, you can subscribe to us at that'sjustwild.com. Hello and welcome to That's Just Wild with me, Steve Backshall.
Me, Lizzie Daly.
And me, Sarah Roberts.
The podcast all about nature, wildlife, and how I once nearly lost a fingertip to the pruning secateur pincers of a hermit crab.
A hermit crab?
I know, it's embarrassing, isn't it?
Why?
And today,
what are you doing?
We're talking about cave dwellers. I have to say, I'm really sorry that I pressed this one on you guys. And I know that I was like, we got to do cave dwellers. But the reason for it is that I have just got back from spending a few days underground filming an extraordinary animal in Slovenia. Have either of you guys been to the majestic nation of Slovenia?
No, I've wanted to forever because they've got bears, haven't they, there as well?
They have so got bears. Oh my gosh, we got the most amazing bear stuff you can possibly imagine. like massive brown bears, all within, 30 metres of us, in broad daylight. I mean, it was wild.
Amazing. You got your bear spray though, right?
No, didn't have anything. Didn't have anything. I think there's over 1,000 bears in the small nation of Slovenia. I came back and I could easily take up a job with the Slovenian Tourist Board. I have become such a Slovenia bore.
You're an advocate.
I am. I think it's the best and most surprising nation I've been to in a long time. Just miles and miles of mountains covered in forest, astounding wildlife, awesome people. It's right next to Italy, so you get shed loads of Italian food.
Cheaper than Italy?
Oh yeah, most definitely.
I'm there.
It was awesome, and we had the bears. We filmed horned vipers there, which were super cool. Did some rock climbing, but the thing that really stood out, and the reason I wanted to talk about cave dwellers, is the olm. To anyone out there who doesn't know what an olm is, this is one of the most perfect cave-adapted creatures on the planet. It's a salamander, which looks surprisingly eel-like. They're very elongated and thin. They are almost entirely lacking in pigment. You can see a certain amount of their internal organs through their bodies. The eyes have recessed away to almost nothing. They have external gill filaments, much like an axolotl, and they're only found in a few cave systems in this area of the mountains that run through the Slovenia and the nations around it. And I honestly was so bewitched by just the idea of this phenomenal creature, endemic to the region, not found anywhere else on Earth, known to the local people as little baby dragons, because over the course of the
they do sound like something that I would have in my fairy book right now that I'm reading.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the local people, who obviously didn't go miles into cave passages in the past, would very occasionally, on times where there was extreme flooding, the olm would get flushed out of the caves and into surrounding fields and into surrounding rivers. And people thought that they were little baby dragons, that they were dragons that had been born and were growing deep within the mountains in the cave systems there.
Did that start the myth, or did that exasperate the myth, I wonder?
Do you mean exacerbate?
Yes,
I'll take exasperate.
That's one,
better.
Steve.
I think it exasperated the myth, for sure. I have to say, I'd heard. I didn't think I'd ever get a chance to go and film olm because it's quite a tricky thing to do. You know, they do live miles and miles underground in these cave passages, but they gave us special permission. We went in with Deadly, my kids' television series, and you kind of make your way into these cave passages, into the areas where there's absolute total darkness, and then get a little dinghy and start paddling through these subterranean lakes.
No way.
Yeah, and I kind of figured, well, listen, we've only got a couple of days. They're really hard to find. We probably won't see one. And almost immediately we got down to one of these lakes, and in the shallows on the edge of it, there were probably 20 olm just swimming around in a few inches of water. We've got footage of them underwater, footage of them just flippering about all over the surface. All of it intoxicating, but that's nothing. And when you start getting into the biology of the olm, which is every single aspect of it is unprecedented.
Sounds amazing.
One of the other things they have is what's called neoteny. Neoteny is something in biology which doesn't happen very often, but it is essentially maintaining your youthful characteristics throughout your life. The animal that is best known for doing that is the axolotl, itself a kind of salamander, which effectively stays as a tadpole for its whole life. That's why it's got those frilly extensions to its gills throughout its life. And if you add a certain hormone into an axolotl, it will grow up. It will effectively turn into what looks like a fire salamander.
No way.
So it offsets that process, probably because it has a lack of available resources or nutrients, so it doesn't go through metamorphosis and turn into an adult. And the olm is exactly the same. It spends its entire life effectively as a baby, and that life can be very, very long. So there have been studies that suggested that olm can live to be as much as 100 years old, and that they can also fast. They can go without food for as much as 10 years.
That's crazy.
Isn't that unreal?
Yeah, they're mythical.
I mean, the only other one I can think of that kind of goes close is we filmed in Central America while cave diving certain kinds of fish called brocchulids. Brocchulids are ancient fish species that have been around for tens of millions of years. And again, they have the same sorts of things, an atrophy of the eyes and a pigment in their bodies. And they, again, can go for extended periods of time without eating, very, very long periods of time. And then they can eat things that are bigger than themselves. They can eat things that are bigger than their own head. And then, spend years and years digesting it. But I don't think they've been clocked as anything like 10 years that you get from
I couldn't
olm.
cope.
They're
I'd die
also,
of hangriness.
I know. Gosh, I skip breakfast and I get grumpy. One of the things that really surprised me was that I assumed naively that olm would have been washed into a cave system tens of millions of years ago, and then all of these adaptations would have happened after they were in the cave. So all of them happened in response to living in a zero light, low food, constant temperature environment.
So like it was a lizard in the first place and just washed in. That's how you imagined it.
Like it was a newt or a salamander. Yeah, exactly. Like a crested newt that has just changed radically over time. But the scientists that we were working with there said that there are at least a couple of different subspecies known now, but they think there are as many as 8 or 9 different species of olm that are completely different and live in totally different cave systems, and therefore would not have been able to interact or would not have been able to interbreed for millions, even tens of millions of years. And they were suggesting that actually some of these adaptations might have happened before they got swept into the cave. So maybe they lived in a swampy environment at the surface, a swampy environment that itself was very, very low light, that very, very low in nutrients already available to your food, and that maybe the stretched body plan or some of the other things might have happened way before they got swept into caves, which I hadn't even considered or thought about. And one of the things about working in caves is that quite often you do find things like this. You do find cave systems, and there will be a particular kind of cave shrimp, cave crab, cave cricket that only lives in that cave system and nowhere else on the planet. And it can be no more than a couple of miles away from another cave system that has never been linked or never been joined to it. And it's completely different. You don't find that species in the other one because they have been split off for eternity from the rest of the world.
It's interesting, though, that you say about how things can be blocked off and just isolated. They are super fragile ecosystems. And I think that's the difficulty of exploring caves. Also, I learned a completely new term I'd never heard of, but so you're almost a speleologist?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so somebody that studies caves. I didn't even know that term. I love that. But it is, for me, like quite a tricky tightrope. It's like a big contradiction in itself, because you want to go and you want to explore all of this area, map it out and find hidden species that may well have lived there for, thousands of years without us knowing. But in the process of even just going into the cave, we are affecting those ecosystems. So just by breathing out, we're putting in carbon dioxide, we're changing the balance of these crazy isolated. It's almost like they've been living in a glass jar this whole time. And I think one of the interesting stories around that involves bats. There was a huge problem for bats in USA, where we lost a number of individuals from a few different species, but the one that was affected most was the little brown bat, and that declined 90%, and it was all due to a fungi, white nose syndrome, and a fungi that grows around the bat's face when they're hibernating. And that, it turns out, was brought back by cave explorers who went to the Ukrainian caves and didn't wash their kit properly, and then ended up accidentally bringing that back to the US. So yeah, it's so tricky, isn't it, to explore these places, but also to protect the wildlife that's living there. You want to prove that it's there and that it's important, but also in doing so, you also put things at risk too.
They're so fragile, these ecosystems. Every single bit of the cave system has formed over hundreds of thousands, millions of years. You get these incredible calcite straws, which are so fragile. They've formed over tens of thousands of years, and even breathing too loud near them is going to break them. And yeah, whenever we do cave exploration, heading into a new cave system, you have to take everything out with you, and I do mean everything. So you get used to putting in a bag and carrying it around with you for however long you're underground, because you can't leave it in there. Things that you leave inside a pristine cave system, unless it's a really active one that's full of, free running water, will stay that way for thousands of years. And it's one of the things that leads to the most incredible discoveries deep inside caves, because you can find the mummified remains of mastodons and short-faced cave bear and stuff, all basically covered with little crackling crystals and with calcite and things. But at the same time, they are impossibly fragile. There is nowhere that you have to be quite so careful when you're moving around.
They're like time capsules, aren't they? They're really, really cool. But speaking of bats, I want to come back to bats, because there was a really, really cool invention that's been made. It's the first bat wearable microphone. So it's like a little backpack that is fitted to the bats, and it has a little microphone on it. And the idea was to find out why bats don't crash into each other when they're leaving the cave. And it was scientists from Tel Aviv Uni that created this, and it's for the greater mouse-tailed bats. So I'm sure, Steve, you've definitely seen this. I don't think I've really seen it Indiana Jones style, but 2,000 plus bats flying out at the same time and coming back. But yeah, the idea was to fit the microphones to the bats so that the scientists could learn why these bats don't crash into each other. And the reality was, it's a little bit like foreign driving. It's because the bats just focus on the one bat in front of them and ignore the rest of them by the sounds of it. But yeah.
Yeah, I've been lucky enough to spend time in some of the most populated bat caves in the world. And, whenever you get an emergence of tens of millions of bats, it's one of the most impressive things in the natural world. One of the ones that blew me away the most was what's called the bat volcano, which is in the Yucatan in Mexico. And at the precise right time of the day, this sinkhole, which is a completely vertical plug hole that drops down to caves below where all these bats live, millions and millions of, I think, Mexican
Wait,
free-tailed
does it
bats.
erupt with bats?
Yes, it does.
No way.
And I'd had it described to me, and I was like, listen, I've seen bat emergencies, dude. I mean, I've seen them. I know what it's like. You're not going to impress me. And we got to the precise right time of the day, just before sunset, and we looked down, and there was nothing in there. Then we heard a few little chirps, and then this spiraling vortex, just kind of like the reverse of water going down a plug hole, erupted upwards, and it kind of came up and up, circling and circling like a fabulous whirlwind, and then erupted out of the top of this bat volcano. and then millions of bats just poured through the forest. We had mist nets up because we were working with scientists who were catching them, and within a millisecond they were full of bats. Like we had to take them down instantly because there were so many bats, and then they just flooded out over the top of the forest like smoke. It was absolutely overpowering. We were, all of us sat there with our jaws on the floor, and it was just like a volcano, and it erupted with lava of bats. To any of you sharp-eyed folk who are watching this online, you might notice that our caves are slightly different now, and that's because we've had some technical issues, so we've switched to a better cave system.
Hopefully.
Whenever you're talking about anything to do with cave-adapted fauna, you'll hear two prefixes. One of those is speleo, and the other one is troglo, both of which essentially mean cave or in caves. But there's lots of specific different ones, aren't there, Lizzie?
I love these names, by the way. There's the trogloxenes, who are occasional visitors. Are you guys trogloxenes?
I'm a trogloxene.
Yeah, I like to go and stick my head in a cave every now and again.
Me and Sarah have actually been in a cave before. Less of a cave, more of a mine, Sarah, but cave-like.
Yeah.
So these are occasional visitors. They depend on caves. Part of their life cycle, a great example of this, are bats. They use them for roost, and then they go and forage outside of those caves. You've then got troglophiles, so they can live either entirely inside a cave or outside a cave. They're not dependent on living inside that cave, and those adaptations that I'll go on to talk about are not as extreme, but they're adaptable. They're able to thrive there. Some examples are cave salamanders. They kind of fall into that category. And then there's the troglobites. There's the true Iranian world. And just on that, I think, because even I was kind of scratching my head to think, well, how does that work? Obviously, over thousands of millions of years, animals evolve to live in these environments, but how do they actually start living in a quite hostile and harsh environment? So how in that kind of environment do you get enough food and a system that's built up to have any species to thrive there? And there's two ways, really. There's guano, and there's the bringing in of organic matter and substrate, and then from leaves, twigs, trees, whatever that may come in, you might get bacteria and fungi growing, and then there's small life that feeds on that fungi, and then that goes on to support larger life like your amphibians and your arachnids. And this is kind of how these cave systems are built, even in the absence of light, even in the absence of photosynthesis. It goes on to support a food chain and have life in some of the most dark places on the planet.
If you went far enough back in any cave, if they kept going and going, does it get to a point where it's like, right, you'll not see any life past a certain point? Is that a thing?
Life becomes much more rare. So in the area, usually in the first couple of 100 meters of a cave, you get all sorts of life that could well be traveling in and out of the cave daily. Bats being the obvious example. As you go further back into the cave, you start to get the troglophilic life, as Lizzie was talking about there. Once you go really deep into a cave system, it's very rare to find anything at all. Once you get properly deep into some of the biggest, longest cave systems, they tend to be pretty devoid of life once you're a couple of kilometers inside. But there are exceptions, and there are animals that will be swept deep into a cave system and then start to evolve in isolation into something unique and something very different. And the fact that those are shut off from other cave systems leads to very high degrees of speciation and, bugs and fish and amphibians that could well only live in one cave system and nowhere else on Earth.
What's the deepest cave you've been into, Steve?
Deepest in terms of depth or in terms of time underground or length? I mean, they're all quite different things. I think that we spend a disproportionate amount of time in caves. I'm not really built for caving, but because it is the environment that is most ripe for exploration, it's the one that we tend to do the most expeditions to.
What do you mean you're not built for caving? You look like you could fit through lots of gaps.
Seriously, getting through squeezes is just... The first really nasty squeeze that I did was at the bottom of a sinkhole called Solo in Borneo, and we dropped down to the the bottom of this extraordinarily impressive sinkhole. And then below it was this kind of like network of tunnels that no human had ever been into before. And as we started getting down, it turned into a really, really abrupt squeeze. And my caving partner, Tim Fogg, who is, I mean, he is Gollum, basically. Love him to bits. Greatest person I've ever been on expeditions with. But he likes caves more than any person I've ever met before. They just bring him to life. Anyway, he'd squeezed on ahead of me. I came through and I got stuck.
Oh, no.
That's
Proper
like the
stuck.
worst thing that could possibly happen, isn't it?
Terrifying.
And we were a long way underground already, and it was bad. And Tim came back to me and he said, well, the only thing that we can do in this situation is just to wait. We'll just wait a couple of days until you start to lose muscle tone and lose weight,
Stop.
and then we'll be able to pull you through. And that somehow gave me the impetus that I needed to completely empty my lungs and manage to squeeze through that last couple of meters, because just the horror, the thought of lying there motionless for a couple of days until I lost weight. I mean, oh
No,
gosh, just
stop.
yeah.
Cavers
no,
are built
no thanks.
differently. They really are.
Yeah. But the longest expedition that I've done in caves is 3 weeks. That was in New Britain. It was exploring a cave system, a staggering cave system called Magaini, and it was the access to it was in this extraordinary gorge. We put a jungle camp, the most miserable jungle camp I've ever spent time in, at the top of the gorge. Every day we had to abseil down ropes for at least a kind of couple of hours to even get into the cave. And it was an incredibly dynamic environment with water just plummeting through it, this white water river flowing out of this cave, which emerged through 3 eye-hole caves in the rock and then sprayed out in a waterfall. And we spent some really, really long periods of time, several days underground without ever coming back up to the surface, which completely messes with your circadian rhythms and really sort of throws you out of whack. And deep, deep inside that cave system, I found this, and this is one of my favorite things in the world.
Wow.
This is an ancient sea
Wow.
snail. It is at
Huge.
least 50 million years old.
It looks like a massive cinnamon bun.
Oh my gosh.
It
I never
does.
thought of that. That is exactly what it looks like. It looks like a massive cinnamon bun. Thank you very much, Sarah. Spot on. And I found this about 12 hours into Magaini River Cave. And the phenomenal thing about it is this is one of those kinds of things that proves how our planet changes and proves how old our planet is, because it's a marine snail. This is a snail that should be on the seabed. And yet it was deep within a cave system in New Britain, hundreds of meters above sea level, and, just lying on the surface inside this cave. I wouldn't take this out now. That was a long time ago, that expedition. And, our attitudes to kind of pilfering stuff like this have changed. But it remains probably my fondest thing that I've ever found on an expedition. I should also say it weighs about the same as 2 house bricks. And I carried it for about 11 hours out of that cave and then 2 hours up the ropes to get back to camp. And then for 2 days of hiking back out the jungle camp. So I kind of feel like I've earned it.
Yeah.
Did you have to tell customs when you flew that one back in the country?
I mean, this was back in the dark ages, Sarah. I didn't have to do those things. I mean, I'm sure I would do now.
I think that's like the cool thing about caves, though. They're almost like a portal to another world, aren't they? Because they're
really
just so secluded and untouched.
Yeah. There's this is nothing compared to your epic story, Steve, but I have to nod to it because it's right on my doorstep and I haven't actually taken the time to go there until recently.
Anna Rogoff.
Not
No?
Rock-off Caves. I'm pretty sure you can stay there now overnight and you can drink champagne and whatever. I don't know.
Rogoff is stunning.
Never been. I'm
Shut
talking about the Pavilan Cave on the coast just by Swansea. No, Danarogov Caves are epic. But I think for me it was the story, talk about discovering things. The story of it is just so fascinating. So there was, in 1823, a man called William Buckland ventured into this cave. And if you imagine, to get there, I was there kind of at the wrong time. So it was a bit of scrambling up these big limestone cliffs, but tucked right up to the top of these cliffs. It's not an easy access. You have to really go in search of it. And tucked up there is this small cave called Pavilan Cave. And in there, he discovered the bones of what he thought was a prehistoric woman. Actually turned out to be a young man, a hunter who lived around 33,000 years ago. And it's the oldest known ceremonial burial in Western Europe, sitting an hour from here where I'm literally recording this. And it just captured my imagination. You know, it's everything that I would dream of finding as a naturalist and going out. You know, a discovery like that would be absolutely extraordinary. And the cave overlooks what is now the Bristol Channel, but back then would have been, you know, flat plains and a perfect hunting ground. And it just paints this whole picture of what it was like to be a hunter back there. And I was sat looking at that same view thinking, blinking heck, it just really kind of captured me.
So would we have had like woolly mammoths and all of those kind of things, like the saber-toothed tigers strolling around the valleys of Wales at that time?
They have been found. Their remnants have been found in caves as well, and woolly rhinos and cave hyena.
Wait, woolly rhinos? How did I not know we had woolly rhinos?
Yeah, look them up. They're so cool.
What?
Yeah, they're really cool.
And they were all here. They were all in England and Wales.
Yeah.
Steve, be honest with me though. When you were going to sleep underground in these caves and you would hear like drips and drops and certain sounds or get a gust of wind, there wasn't even a tiny part in the back of your mind that had that kind of primal fear of what the hell could be lurking in the dark?
Do you know what? Once you turn off your lights, that all-enveloping darkness that is like a blanket over your senses, and you fall asleep incredibly quickly and incredibly deeply. So much so that on one of those expeditions, we all went out Sparko pretty much as soon as we turned off our last light, and we were woken up by water lapping into our sleeping bags because there'd been a massive storm outside and the water level inside the cave had come up. And
it's like that Thai cave with the kids.
Exactly, yeah. Thankfully, it didn't come up high enough to lock us off because we would have been in big, massive trouble.
Wow.
But we all pretty much slept through it. We didn't realise until we were pretty much floating away on our airbeds.
That's how it starts.
And I should say that you were talking about that cave in Wales, and I mentioned Dana-Rogoff, and I sense that you probably thought Dana-Rogoff, that show cave people go to. You know,
I did.
The deeper parts of Dana-Rogoff are some of the most beautiful you will see anywhere in the world. The cloud chamber, these are not open to the public. These are ones you have to get special permission to go into. It's a lot of caving to get to them. But the cloud chamber has probably the most perfect kind of amount of calcite straws of any place that I've ever been before. And when they're backlit, these phenomenal structures that just tumble down from the ceiling, they're thousands of years old. They're impossibly fragile. It is staggeringly beautiful. It also has what's called the long crawl, which is not a squeeze, but it's, I think, about the length of a football pitch. And it is throughout its length. You have to be on your belly for the whole thing. And if you get even remotely claustrophobic, my director had to be taking beta blockers beforehand because he was so terrified about going through it. But to pop out the other end into the cloud chamber is one of the great sites of natural history. It is here, right next to a show cave that tourists are going into all the time. And it's something that very few people ever get to see. And it's right there in Wales.
That's cool.
Sign us up, Steve. Lizzie and I will be ready with our hard hats.
Sarah, have you ever done any caving or been in any caves?
Yeah, little bits and bats, just more for fun, you know. And, you know, if you can go somewhere where you can get a guide and get a bit further back. But I think the scarier ones are the water filled, but we did a little bit in the Galapagos, and I was the one that was absolutely gunning to get us into this cave. Like I made such an argument with Dan that we had to go in this cave. You don't know what we could find. There could be a whole species because it was on all the sharks, and I think it was on the map of Cave of Wonders or something. So in my head I got Aladdin, and I persuaded him. We went in, and it went quite far back, and the further back that we went, I started not enjoying it quite as much because my torch was a little bit on off, and I noticed when it went completely off, I was like, I actually don't remember which way we came into this. And then I think I would go in my own head a little bit, like with you, what you did there, Steve, because I think I've listened to too many true stories of where it's gone wrong, where people have taken the wrong turning in a cave and then run out of air or run out of food or just cannot get back out of these cave systems. So I love them and I'm equally terrified of them all at the same time.
I tell you one where I was getting properly creeped out actually was a particular cave system that we worked in Mexico, searching for something called a Mexican night snake. It's effectively a kind of rat snake that hangs down from the cave roof and catches bats. And I've filmed there twice for 2 days each time, spending most of the night inside the cave. The twist was that we worked out on the first filming trip that the snakes are extraordinarily susceptible to light of any kind. So once you get to the place where you know that the snakes are going to hang down and start snatching bats as they fly past them on the wing, you have to be in total darkness. And any light whatsoever, the snakes just don't come out, or they come out and they retreat and you don't get anything at all. So the only way that we figured out, this was before we had easily available thermal imaging that you'd be able to use, was to have the infrared setting on the camera, on the little tiny camera. You would put it to your eye, you'd squeeze it to your eye so that no light would spill out, and you'd turn it on every couple of minutes and you'd look and see if a snake was hanging down or not. And if you didn't do it that way, then they just wouldn't come out, or they'd come out and they'd disappear. So you had to sit in total darkness with the cave roof comes down to probably about, I guess, your midriff height. So you have to be sat on the ground on thick guano with cockroaches and giant spiders going, just climbing over you, with bats flying past your face and their wings hitting you and in your hair and everything. And you have to be in total darkness. And if you're not in total darkness, you don't get what you've been in there to try and find. And that I did find really unpleasant, really creepy, because your mind does start to play tricks on you, and any slight tickle that you get is a giant centipede that's climbing up your back. And
it's like nasty. Indiana Jones-esque, that, isn't it? That really reminds you of put your hand in that and it's full of all the centipedes and bugs.
Queasy. We did though manage to get one, and it was almost a fluke that I managed to get it on camera, but we managed to get one of these snakes, and you could see that it reacts to the bat's wings and snatches out, grabs a hold of this bat, and then swallows this thing, which is much bigger than its own head. It's incredibly grotesque to witness, but it is one of my favorite pieces to camera in all of Deadly, because once they've grabbed a hold of the bat and they start swallowing it, then you can turn the lights on. And so we've got this amazing image of a snake hanging right in front of my face, eating a bat, a live bat, whole, while I'm talking about it. And it's a properly grotesque and awesome thing, but not as grotesque as the Scolopendra centipedes. So these are giant centipedes. They can be 30 centimeters long, so as long as a standard ruler, that will hang down from cave roofs in Venezuela and catch bats the same way the snakes are doing, and then eat them whole. That is, oh my gosh, spine chilling.
These centipedes are enormous, Steve. I've seen pictures of them on the internet, but how does it actually work, the kind of hunting and the eating of these bats?
The bit that gets me is that this is an invertebrate that has a teeny tiny brain that will, every night, take itself from a crack or a crevice somewhere in the cave up to the very roof of the cave, and then it uses its back legs to hold itself in place, and the front of the body dangles down into the air where the bats are going to be flying, which shows a degree of forethought and planning from an invertebrate that is, I would say, pretty much unprecedented. They have a plan, they have a strategy, which they follow through to get themselves in the best possible place to catch a bat. Once they grab a hold of a bat, and I think it's pretty much the same as the snake, that it seems to be that they can sense the vibration of the bat's wings. They envenomate it with their modified front legs, which have a fiercely toxic and incredibly painful venom that they inject into the bat. And then they shred it. And it is the most grotesque
they got pincers
looking thing. Their mouth parts will just rip it apart. It's one of the most grotesque things that you will ever see, and like tearing out the internal organs of this poor struggling animal. It's horrific. I would also say that the centipede themselves is probably the hardest animal to handle of anything of that size I've ever handled.
Really?
You know, there is no 30 centimeter snake on earth that you would struggle to hold on to, but they are preternaturally strong. They are so powerful.
Did you get bitten at all?
Well, I got savaged, but luckily I was wearing pretty hefty gloves, and the bite didn't get through the gloves, because if it had, I mean, the pain would be, you just don't even think about it.
I've
Yuck.
got this image in my head that's absolutely extraordinary. Yeah, they're incredible.
Speaking of something that hangs about in a cave system full of bat poo and likes to eat bats, in Gabon's cave, there's dwarf crocodiles that eat bats in there. And they essentially spend their entire life in the dark, swimming around in bat poo and eating dead bats or crickets or whatever they can find in that disgusting liquid guano, because that is what they're swimming in. And they've spent so long in there in the pitch black for thousands of years that it's actually mutating their skin. So they're now orange. They're orange coloured little alligators that live in these systems. And would you believe that in a study, they have found that they're actually healthier than their forest counterparts? They spend their entire life living in poo, and they believe that it's Florida International University that looked at them, and they believe that firstly it's the urea from the bat poo that's chemically bleaching their skin and turning it orange, but it may be mutating over a long period of time because they've done genetic analysis as well. But they believe that because there's no predators in there and just loads and loads and loads of crickets and bats, that they're actually healthy. They're not so stressed. They're quite happy swimming around in all that bat poo.
I love it. Caves really strike me as the perfect case study for this whole kind of the convergent evolution that we've talked about in the past, these traits evolving independently, across different parts of the world, but shaped by these environments. I wanted to throw kind of two more arachnids in there because they have the same adaptations, this troglodytic kind of way of life in completely different parts of the world. So you may have heard of the Kauai cave wolf spider. It's the cousin of the wolf spider, but it's endemic to just a few small caves in Hawaii on Kauai Island. We're talking like just under the palm of your hand, maybe smaller, maybe like that sort of size. So one of the really cool things about them is that they've lost their eyes. Again, very, very common in those species that, and Steve's already talked about the olm as well. But these characteristics are also seen in this species, and their exoskeleton is also completely lost pigment and that colour. And, like many spiders that rely on that mechanoreception, that ability for the hairs to detect the world around them, for this wolf spider, it's particularly important. Now, if you were to kind of launch to somewhere completely different, to the limestone caves in Texas, you'll actually find a species called the tooth cave pseudoscorpion. Also an arachnid, not scorpion, but as the name suggests, it's kind of got these big kind of pedipalps that look like pincers that aren't. And they also have lost their pigment. They've lost their eyes. They have this kind of translucent colour. They are the perfect case study for this convergent evolution. It's fabulous.
I think one thing that both you and Steve have just highlighted, though, is just how many different types of life are in these caves. And there was one guy who is a biologist working on a lion project to monitor leopards and hyenas. And he found 14 different predator species accidentally when he set up his camera trap outside one of these caves in Uganda. He was actually just looking to get the leopards, but what he found was civets, fish eagles, rock python, monkey, baboons, all sorts of creatures, including the hyena and the leopards, that were predating at the edge of these cave systems.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think quite often we're painting pictures of caves as being exciting places, interesting places, beautiful places even. I have one that is definitely an exception to all of those rules.
Super boring.
No, beyond hideous. Like one of the nastiest places I've ever had to spend time.
Oh, really?
It's called Gomantong. It's in Borneo, in Sabah in Borneo. And it's home to about 300,000 of one particular kind of bat, and has been for a very, very long time. And because of that, a mountain of guano, of poo, has built up there, which is beyond explanation. It's absolutely vast. There was a legendary shot, and I think it was the first Planet Earth series. They did a dolly shot over the top, which is a moving shot over the top of this vast pile of poo. And the whole thing, you can't see the poo because all you can see is this shifting carpet, this morass of cockroaches and centipedes and crickets going on as far as the eye can see in every direction. It is beyond vile. Even someone like me that adores those kinds of creatures and finds so much about them that's fascinating, I find it very, very difficult. And we spent 2 days in Gomantong. And now, if you were going to do that, you would be wearing full PPE from head to toe, and you'd be completely, shut off. We didn't have anything. We were just doing it basically shorts and t-shirt, and nobody even thought to wear a face mask because, this was before the time that we realised that, some of that
COVID
stuff can't be good for you.
Yeah.
Wait, Steve, did you swim in it? Like, how do you actually get in? Like, how did you get into the cave if there was that much guano?
We abseiled in. We lowered in from the ceiling. It is a stunning shot because you lower down through this skylight up above through with a beam of light that you're kind of abseiling down through. It looks like something out of a Hollywood movie. And then your feet touch the ground and you go up to your thighs in guano. We started off trying to wear welly boots, but it's pointless because your wellies were just full of cockroaches. So we just ended up, basically Crocs and shorts because, there's nothing you can do about it. And there's a lot of snakes. There's a lot of scorpions. There's also these centipedes called Scutagera, which are very, very well adapted for living in caves. They have, I think, 16 pairs of really oversized, super long legs, each one of which functions like an antenna. So they tap around them as they move. They're super, super tactile. Their movement is the creepiest of any animal I've ever seen. You want to see something that is going to give you the willies. Watch a Scutagera running. And the Scutagera that are in that cave system, the people that live there and work there say that they have the nastiest bite of anything there. In fact, they told tales of people dying after being bitten by Scutagera, which makes them even more creepy. And the people who are there, well, have a guess why there are people that live in that vile, nasty cave the whole time. What they're there for?
Are they trying to farm the guano? Is there anything in it that they can use?
Guano's worth a lot of money, isn't it?
So that is one thing, and it's been harvested from caves like that for a very long time. But in this particular cave, it's something which is much more valuable, and in this part of the world, in Southeast Asia, is sometimes referred to as being like white gold, and it's birds' nests.
Oh.
So swiftlets and swallows and martins will nest inside caves like this alongside the bats. They make nests out of their spit, and those nests are highly prized for bird's nest soup. They
eat that. But I've
eat
seen
it.
that in the UK on the side of our barn, or like where I grew up.
Yeah.
Like I've seen it in the farms, and that I wouldn't have thought that was edible.
Delicacy.
Well, yeah,
It looks gross.
in Gomantong, when I first went there, I haven't been there for a little while now, but there were ladders going up hundreds of meters into the ceiling of the cave that were just made out of bamboo, and people were without any ropes, without harnesses, without anything, climbing hundreds of meters up on these spindly bamboo ladders. Must be one of the most dangerous jobs in the world, to collect the bird's nests, which were then sold for this soup, which commands an insane price. Nowadays, all through that part of the world, anywhere that you've got a lot of the cave swiftlets nesting, there will be artificial nest sites that bring them in, and the nests are collected, but they still collect them in the caves as well. They are still one of the most valuable commodities you can get in that part of the world. The right kinds of bird nest will sell for as much as $9,500 per kilo. There are vast fines and people being imprisoned for collecting them illegally. And
I was going to say, how do they keep coming? Because the swallows come back every year to the same nest in sight, generally, don't they?
They do.
It takes a bit of effort to build a nest like that.
Huge effort. And the nest itself will have different value depending on how pure it is. So some of them are kind of black and grimy and full of feathers and bits of poo and stuff like that. Those command a lesser price than the ones that are essentially just pure sticky spit.
I literally can't think of anything else to eat in a liquefied version as little bits of branches and bird poo. But each to their own. It's obviously a delicacy some places, eh?
I'd love to add on one story of another species that's taken advantage of caves in a slightly unusual way. So I don't know if you've heard of the Kittim cave elephants. Population of elephants in Africa on Mount Elgon, which used to be the largest mountain in Kenya, I believe, but over, thousands, millions of years, it's eroded to now actually only being the 8th tallest. Anyway, so there's a cave system that pushes in about 200 meters, and these elephants have learnt to mine the walls for salt. So
what?
It's absolutely awesome. Yeah, there's clips of them, there's camera trap clips and setups of cameras in these caves that watch them kind of really. I don't know if you've watched the behaviour of elephants switch from day to night, but they're very aware. Their senses are really heightened. Obviously, they're limited in what they can see, but you can see them navigating through the caves using their ability to hear the vibrations through their feet, touch, and they're navigating along these walls, and then they use their tusks to dig into these walls, into the roof of this cave, to essentially extract all that salt. And we see this behaviour in the daytime and in lots of different species that need the extra nutrients and salt from the natural environment, but they'll get that from, soils. I see them digging up around watering holes as well, just trying to access some of that salt. But it's such a cool thing to see, this huge animal trying to navigate through this cave system. It's kind of an extraordinary twist on caves. Well, that's all we got time for today. Remember, you'll have a Q&A episode coming your way on Friday. So please send your questions to questions@that'sjustwild.com and we'll get to them.
That's Just Wild is an original Fresh Air production. Its producers are Eva Higginbotham and Izzy Clark. You can follow us on your favourite podcast app. Leave us a review. It makes all the difference to the whole team. And for ad-free listening, our newsletter, special deep dive episodes, and members-only benefits, you can subscribe to us at that'sjustwild.com. Remember, we're on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and you can find us at That's Just Wild Pod.
Thanks for listening. See you next week.